Obito Uchiha is one of the main final antagonists of the Naruto series, and he is known for not revealing his identity up until the final stages of the war arc. The mystery behind Tobi and then himself proclaiming his mother was one the community was very much invested back in the day, but looking back at the entire story with hindsight, many people claim that Kishimoto never really planned for Obito to be a character to begin with in the start of the Naruto series, and that he changed his mind whenever he was writing Tobi, and Tobi became Obito very later on in the stages of the story. Let's talk about this, and if Tobi being Obito in the end of the day was a retcon or not. The first thing we have to do is find traces of Obito's existence in the story, and, well, the first very easy one to identify is Kakashi and his entire character. When Kakashi shows up in the 4th chapter of the series, we don't really get much about his backstory, but in the Bell test, we start learning about a little bit of what happened to him in the past. And the most important part of this section of the story is that Kakashi tells Team 7 about Obito's philosophy. A ninja that doesn't follow the rules is scum, but a ninja that abandons his friends is worse than scum. Obito said that to Kakashi just before they went to rescue Rin, and it was the push Kakashi needed to stop being the cold and uptight guy that he was. And this happens in the very first arc of the series. It's also shown in this very same arc, the Leaf Village Memorial, where they immortalize the names of the ninjas who died for their villages, and it's very much connected to Kakashi, and we know Obito's name is there. But you could argue that the words Kakashi told Team 7 there were not Obito's to begin with. Kishimoto could have just come up with them in the spot, and it wasn't really something about Kakashi's backstory, it was just something Kakashi thought was nice. This doesn't prove that Obito was a character to begin with. So when was the first time that Obito was mentioned or that he appeared? Some people might say that it was after the Chunin exams when Kakashi was visiting the memorial of the Leaf Village, and Yugao arrived and asked, "Are you here for Obito?" And Kakashi said yes. And, well, you can see here proof that Obito wasn't just an afterthought of a character. He was in Naruto very early on, just after the Chunin exams. But actually, he appears much earlier than that, if you pay attention. Now, he doesn't actually appear in the story, but he appears in the manga. In chapter 16 of Naruto, in the first page, one of those pages Kishimoto just does a funny or cutesy or cool illustration to hype up the chapter or a particular character, we see Kakashi sleeping at his house with the pictures of Team 7 and Team Minato right above his head, and we clearly see that Obito Uchiha is in the picture. Kishimoto had thought way ahead of time that Obito and Kakashi were going to be teammates, and that Minato, Naruto's dad, was also going to be Kakashi's sensei. And those pictures being there, even though the panel itself is not part of the main story, it's a canon indication that Kakashi had that picture in his house in chapter 16 already. So Kishimoto thought about Obito at least at around chapter 16 of the story. There's also the entire Kakashi has a Sharingan with a scar on his face story in the entire Zabuza arc. Sasuke is even a little bit taken aback because, well, aren't the Uchihas supposed to be the ones that have the Sharingan? Why does Kakashi have one? And also, the scar indicates there's a lot of backstory about Kakashi having a Sharingan. So it's very clear that Kishimoto thought about the backstory of Kakashi and Obito way before Naruto Shippuden or Tobi appeared. Still, Obito existing prior to Naruto Shippuden doesn't prove Obito was always Tobi behind the mask and the one posing as Madara. Kishimoto could have changed his mind along the way, so let's analyze this next. Now, a very common misconception that many people have because they haven't read the manga and only watched the anime is that the Kakashi flashbacks happen midway through Naruto Shippuden, which is not the case in the manga. The flashbacks of Kakashi with his team, Minato, Obito, and Rin, when Obito gets smashed by a rock, they happened between parts 1 and 2, you know, during the time skip, essentially. Not in universe, of course, it's just when the manga was coming out. Kakashi's flashback arc came in between, you know, when the time skip was happening. And it explained exactly how things unfolded and how Kakashi got his scar, and his Sharingan, how he learned Obito's words, and how he became a better shinobi because of them. And the first thing we have to note here is that we didn't see Obito dying for real. Now, of course, he was crushed by a rock, but let's be real, who dies in shonen anime crushed by things? And then we don't even see his body. He is just buried by a bazillion rocks. This should ring a lot of bells, because if you don't see a body about a character that has some very significant part in the story, and if the author attempts to make it seem he died, well, there's a good possibility the character isn't actually dead. It wasn't like Neji, for instance, where characters confirmed he was dead. Now, I'll give it to you that Obito's final thoughts in that little arc were very final, but among all the quote-unquote deaths in Naruto, this one is the most open-ended as far as I can tell. You know, the Leaf Village didn't even bother to go and check if Obito's body was there. I guess they were preoccupied, and maybe they tried and never found anything, but anyways, that's a bit of a plot hole that could be debated, but still there are several justifications as to why they wouldn't go look for Obito. Regardless, his backstory was set up, and in the first arc of Naruto Shippuden, we get introduced to this very strange new character that wears an orange mask that has only one eye hole, and it just so happens to be on the right side. Obito so happens to have given Kakashi his left eye, therefore he would only have his right eye, and the hole was on the right side. That seems a little bit of an indication to me. I don't know. Like, think about it for a second here. Kishimoto chose the perfect place in the story to tell the flashback of Obito just before Tobi was introduced in the following arc, manga-wise. Yes, Tobi only appears in the very end of the Kazekage rescue arc, but he does show up, and he seems to be an oddball. Let's be real. The first indication that this character is not really what he seems to be is that he is only there for comic relief as far as the audience can tell. And yes, Naruto has a lot of comedy, there are many funny moments in the story, but every character has more to them than simply comic relief. And Tobi was just that. Now, he was very funny, but this was very strange. From the outset, everyone was suspicious about him, and also he had the same hair as Obito did. Kishimoto didn't really try to, you know, conceal his plan here. Also, if you keep on saying his name, you know, without stopping, Tobi, 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 Obito, 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 it's gonna turn into Obito. Not exactly the most subtle naming convention here, but then again, Obi-Wan Kenobi was hiding as Ben Kenobi in Star Wars. In hindsight, it's easy to say that Kishimoto had other intentions than just comic relief with Tobi from the beginning. He goofs around for a while, but he showcases here and there glimpses of a lot of power, especially when he kinda helps Deidara tanking and destroying the Three Tails, and when he just completely negates Sasuke's slashing attack when Sasuke kinda blitzed him. He phased through Sasuke's sword and pretended he was impressed with him. But then of course we get one of the coolest scenes in Naruto Shippuden, which is when Tobi reveals himself to be Madara Uchiha to Pain and Conan with the flashing lightning in the background. It's such a cool scene in the anime and in the manga. Both of the versions are amazing. And this was a very big deal because Madara was being hyped up as this legendary character. Now, back in the day, some people actually thought Tobi was indeed Madara, but you can also assume here that, wait a minute, why would Kishimoto put a mask on Madara? Why wouldn't he just take off his mask once he reveals himself to be Madara Uchiha, because there's nothing to hide anymore, at least from Conan and Pain in that scene. But no, he keeps his mask, which makes the audience keep on guessing, who is this guy? Is he really Madara? His actions, they seem to indicate that he is, but still, why is he still wearing a mask? That doesn't make much sense, does it? But then we get definitive proof that, well, actually he was Obito all along. In the fight against Conan, if you remember correctly, Conan uses her papers to first assault Tobi. He begins to absorb them with Kamui, but Conan detonates them and explodes Tobi's mask away. And then we see kind of half of his face during the fight because the mask doesn't really explode all the way through. It's just like cracked, you know, half of it falls off, but we see his face a little bit, and we can already see from those scenes Obito's mangled face because of the rock incident. The main character design trait that Obito has are those very pronounced wrinkles on the right side of his face because of the rock, and in the scene where he fights Konan and gets the mask blown off, Kishimoto does something very clever because Obito has the bags beneath his eyes just like Madara does in his character design, but Obito has them because of the rock and not because it's just how he looks. So Obito uses that to fake out the audience, saying, no, look, it's Madara's eye, look, those bags underneath the eyes. But then if you pay close attention, there are a couple of moments that you can see other wrinkles underneath. They're very subtle, but they are there, and they were very much foreshadowing this person to be Obito. And then of course in the war arc, Kabuto brings Madara himself back, meaning that he couldn't be alive, so somebody else has to be the masked man. Also, in the Minato versus masked man fight, it's very obvious what Kishimoto was doing here. He was making the former student of Minato, fighting him to the death. A very interesting development. Of course, Minato didn't know who he was, and neither did the audience at the time, but in hindsight, it makes so much more sense for Obito, the guy who had a very close relationship to Minato, fight him in that flashback than a guy that Minato doesn't even know. Now, Madara could be an interesting character here just because of his legendary status, but like take somebody like Shisui, for example, which was a theory back in the day. It wouldn't make sense. And by the way, when we talk about Shisui, he's the only other red herring Kishimoto used for Tobi. Aside from the very obvious one, which was Madara, who Tobi posed himself as and wanted everybody to believe he was, the only other time Kishimoto gave a false hint about who the masked man may be was when Tobi and Kabuto were talking, and Kabuto said, I couldn't find Shisui's body anywhere, so I couldn't revive him, and then the panel cuts to Tobi slash Obito slash Madara there, implying that, is he Shisui? Is that the reason why Kabuto couldn't find Shisui's body, because he's actually alive? And that was one of the only other red herrings we got for Tobi. Also, it just makes so much more sense for him to be Obito story-wise. It gives Kakashi much more opportunity for character growth, Minato as well, and the connection he had, and also Naruto's birth and the entire Nine Tails attacking the village, killing Minato and Kushina situation, which caused Naruto to become a Jinchuri, to happen because of someone they have a relationship to, not Shisui, for example. And then the entire relationship Obito has with Madara, Madara being the man who rescued him from death. It was actually Zetsu who grabbed him, but it was on Madara's orders and all that. Adding the mystery element to the story, not knowing who Tobi was a very good idea by Kishimoto. It keeps the audience engaged, it makes people have those theories, debates, and this keeps the fandom alive and just very invested in the story. It's also brilliant how he made Obito take the mantle of Madara Uchiha and use the legendary status of Madara as a shinobi and a menace to just wreak havoc in the world just by saying, yes, I'm Madara Uchiha, I'm gonna start a war, I'm gonna do all those types of things. Let's see what you're gonna do about it. When we see the entire pile of evidence put together ever since part 1, when Kakashi tells Team 7 Obito's words, to Obito actually appearing in panel in chapter 16, to Kakashi having a Sharingan and a scar ever since he had a serious fight in the series, to Tobi showing up just one arc after Obito's flashback was introduced with an eye hole on the right side of his face, Obito's exact same hair, and then Obito actually having those wrinkles on his face during the Konan fight. It's undeniable that Kishimoto thought about Obito Uchiha and the backstory with Kakashi, as well as the fact that Obito was alive and a villain from the very beginning of the story. I'm not gonna say chapter 1 because we don't know if that was the case. Naruto seemed to be going a very different direction in chapter 1 and 2, but then Kishimoto seems to have changed his mind in a lot of things. But from very early on, Obito and the entire story behind him and Kakashi were a real thing, and it wasn't a retcon. The only thing that there's a small possibility of it being a retcon was that Obito himself caused the Nine Tails attack, which could or could not be a retcon, but I still think Kishimoto knew Obito was behind it all along, because by chapter 16 he already knew Minato was the sensei of Obito and Kakashi, meaning that they already had the relationship, and it's much more interesting for a former student to cause all those very bad things than the Nine Tails just appearing out of nowhere. Let me know, who did you think Tobi was before Obito's revelation? Also subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already, and like this video to help me out with the YouTube algorithm. It really helps the channel grow. And also watch this other video right here for more Naruto content just like this one. Thank you so much for watching.